Welcome to this rapid revision session on the Norman Church. A Norman church can be seen in the photograph here with some pretty typical architectural features. Perhaps you have a Norman church near to you. After all, many of them have really stood the test of time, and that's kind of the point. When we're looking at the Norman church, we're talking about the organisation as a whole and how William transformed it in order to fit his needs better, and also the church really went along with this because it provided them with more power and privilege too. After 1066, William claimed that there were problems with the Anglo Saxon churches and how they were run. Perhaps these images might give you a clue. Problem number 1. Saxon clergy were often absent from their parishes as they had more than one office or job of duty. Problem number 2. Church offices and sacraments, prayers, were sold, favouring the rich. Effectively, you could pay to get out of hell. William didn't think this was fair, although actually a lot of this carried on for a lot longer than after William's reign. Thirdly, nepotism. This means giving jobs to friends and family. Church jobs were given to the family and friends of those who were already there, and they weren't always qualified to do the job. And lastly, clergy were marrying when they should be celibate under Catholic canon law. This had usually been ignored in Anglo-Saxon times, perhaps one of the benefits of England being an island. But when William came along, he wanted a more strict and Catholic way of doing things. After all, the Pope had supported his invasion of England in the first place. One of the people that William appointed to make these changes was his trusted regent, Archbishop Lanfranc. Let's have a look at some of his achievements. William decided to fix the problems that he had identified with the Saxon Church as he saw them. Arguably the most important figure in achieving this was the powerful Archbishop of Canterbury and sometime regent of England, Lanfranc. The Pope never recognised Lanfranc's importance as he wanted to limit his power, but that didn't matter to William. Lanfranc believed in reform and had made major changes to the church in Normandy. Lanfranc was also recognised as primate, chief archbishop in England. The Archbishop of Canterbury remains the most important church person in England. Lanfranc and the church established bishops' courts called synods to settle certain disputes and make up certain religious and spiritual decisions. William gave Lanfranc his full support, and so he was able to create reforms. William also realised that the church could make him look more important. Having the support of the church made him more secure. William did not get on well with the church initially, mainly because William refused to swear loyalty to the Pope, even though the Pope had supported William in 1066, so he tried to get the church on side in other ways. Lanfranc made reforms such as increasing bishop authority and banning priests from marrying. Lanfranc was very religious and built Battle Abbey on the site of the Battle of Hastings, effectively as a way of saying sorry for what had gone on there. But let's have a look at some of the physical changes to churches. They're important too, because they became a physical and permanent statement of the Norman intent to invade and stay. Have a look at this church. It's not very big or imposing. In fact, you can ignore the building off to the right, that's a later extension. The original church is the small stone building to the left with a small tower and the porchway. Many Anglo-Saxon churches were actually built from timber. That's one of the reasons why so few exist and survive today. St Gregory's Minster in Yorkshire was actually built out of stone, and so it's a rare survivor from this time, and it was not really much modified or rebuilt by the Normans afterwards. However, not that many miles away in York itself is a very different statement of the church's power. From St Gregory's Minster to York Minster. Look at the size of that. Okay, many parts of this were built later, those pointed arches being English perpendicular, which is a slightly later architectural style. But the point is here that the Normans were building massive stone churches on a much more monumental style. This is a statement of their wealth, the power of the church too, but also their domination over the English, not just in life, but their immortal souls. So let's play a bit of a game of spot the difference. Here we can see a small church built in the 9th century in Essex, towards the end of the Anglo-Saxon period. The church is made from wood, and although much of the wood would have been replaced over the ages, it's typical of the size and construction of some Anglo-Saxon churches. Compare that to the church rebuilt by the Normans at Iffley in Oxford in the 12th century. Look at the materials. Stone is so much more permanent and strong and hard-wearing than wood, one of the reasons why many Norman churches survive in one way or another. Look at the shape of the arches, those powerful semicircular arched windows, for example. We'll have a look at what that means but it is actually very symbolic of what the Normans were trying to communicate. And the tower and the sheer scale of the place is just that much more impressive. So here are some differences between Anglo Saxon churches and Norman ones. Firstly, materials. Anglo Saxon churches were often made of wood or recycled materials like Roman tiles. If you see an ancient church and you see little orange slivers within it, that's probably come from a Roman villa. Norman churches, though, were often built from stone, imported from Caen in Normandy, which was done at great expense but would have really made them stand out against the English countryside. Also their scale. Norman churches were built on a much larger scale, with a choir, nave and transepts. The choir is the section of the church where the choir would stand and where the altar was. The nave was the long, thin bit of the church, named after naval ships, if there is a connection there, where the congregation would stand. And the transepts were side chapels. Often the biggest Norman churches, when looked up from the top, made the shape of a cross. This scale was impressive. It was a way of thanking God for victory to the Normans, and also a way of telling the Saxons that the Normans were there to stay. But then there's the architectural style. Norman churches were built in the Romanesque style. Those are those semicircular arch windows that I mentioned before, and the columns. This was a way of imitating the Romans, who had also built an empire, and this was deliberate. This is the Normans saying, we are the successors of the Romans, and we too are going to have a powerful empire. Some final points then. William saw the church as a means to further exercise Norman power and dominate the English. Archbishop Lanfranc was tasked with fixing many of the perceived problems with the Saxon church. Although he and William was not always popular with the Pope, this he did. He became very powerful in his own right too. But don't forget the style. Churches were rebuilt in the Norman Romanesque style, which emphasised that God was on the Normans' side and, most of all, that they were in England to stay, with God on their side. Again, I urge you to think about nearby churches to you. What are they built out of? Do they have similar Norman features? If they do, the chances are they're around 1,000 years old and they date back to the Norman period. And maybe that shows us the permanence of what William did to England. He was in charge not only of people's everyday lives, not just the law, but he wanted to make people believe that he was in charge of their very souls as well. That concludes this video on the Norman Church. I hope it's been useful to you, and if it has, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. If there's a topic that you really want me to do a rapid revision video on, put it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. Thanks very much for watching.